What you are going to read now is a direct conversation, like the one that takes place in a doctor's office, between someone who spends his life taking care of the health of others and a person who deserves to know the truth before it is too late. It is not a ready-made text from the internet. It is a warning built on decades of experience, looking into the eyes of patients who arrived too late or at the right time. And they all had one thing in common. Their feet were screaming, but no one taught anyone to listen. Even before any laboratory test, before any formal diagnosis, the body's already sending messages, and the first place where these messages appear is on the feet. Most people believe that you can only know if your sugar is high after pricking your finger or waiting for the result of the blood. And it makes sense to think so, because that's what traditional medicine has taught for decades. But those who follow cases every day, inside the office, week after week, see something different. You see that the body begins to give signals long before any number appears on the paper. And the feet are the most honest mirror of this silent warning. The reason I'm gathering this information here is simple. There have been many patients who have walked normally, or worse, ended up in an emergency room and had every indication that something was wrong for months, sometimes years, but never knew how to interpret what they saw. Today, this knowledge will be shared so that no one has to go through this without understanding. Think of a man of about 67 years old, already retired, who always took care of his diet, always felt willing. He came for a routine appointment. Before asking for any exam, the conversation was about the feet. He commented, almost without giving it importance, that he had felt his feet half numb for some time, but he thought it was a thing of age. What he didn't know is that, among the 9 signs that will be described here, he already had 4. When the fasting blood test was ready, the number exceeded 200. He had been living with diabetes for more than 2 years without having any idea. That's why it's so important to recognize what the feet are trying to say. The American Diabetes Association has already shown that 1 in 5 people with diabetes in the United States has not yet received the diagnosis. This represents millions of individuals living daily with a silent condition, which gradually damages the nerves, kidneys, vision, and of course, the feet. The good news is that a simple blood test, which costs a few dollars, can detect all of this early. But first you need to know what to look for. So let's go to the first sign, something that almost everyone has felt at one time or another, but when it is repeated for no clear reason, it deserves attention. That tingling sensation, numbness, as if the foot was asleep. Many associate this with the way they sit, the way they cross their legs, and in fact, once in a while, it happens to anyone. But when the numbness comes back often, without a specific position to explain it, the conversation shifts. What's going on there, and what doctors call peripheral neuropathy, is one of the first signs that blood sugar has been elevated for quite some time. Excess glucose in the bloodstream begins to attack the protective layer that surrounds the nerves. It's a slow process, so most people don't realize the beginning. To make it easier to understand, imagine that nerves are like electrical wires, each with a plastic cover around it. This layer is what allows the signal to travel clean from the brain to the foot. When blood sugar remains high, it is as if an acid is slowly eroding this layer. The wire still works for a while, but the signals start to get confused. And this confusion is exactly the tingling. Data show that peripheral neuropathy affects almost half of people with diabetes, being the most common complication, and almost always starts in the feet. Millions of people feel it every day and throw it there. The most important daily advice is simple. Take a walk of 20 to 30 minutes without haste every single day. Movement is the best medicine to keep the blood circulating to the feet and protect the nerve endings. Also, start reducing added sugar in your diet and start today, not tomorrow. The second sign is one of the most painful because it does not appear during the day when you are busy, but at night at bedtime when there is nothing to divert attention. Many attribute this feeling to the fact that they spent the day on their feet, the heat of summer, or simply fatigue. But when the person describes that their feet seem to be on fire, especially when lying down, this is taken very seriously. Burning on the soles of the feet, especially at night, is a classic and early sign of diabetic neuropathy. The mechanism is as follows. The nerves in the feet have already been damaged by excess glucose, and now they are starting to send the wrong signals to the brain. The brain receives a heat message even if nothing hot is touching the foot. It's like a faulty fire alarm. The building isn't on fire, but the broken sensor goes off anyway. The burning does not come from outside, it comes from inside the injured nervous tissue, and this is a cry for help. Research published in the journal Diabetes Care showed that burning pain in the feet is one of the first symptoms reported by patients who would later be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, often appearing 1 to 3 years before formal diagnosis. 2 habits are recommended here. First, drink at least 8 glasses of water a day because proper hydration helps the kidneys eliminate excess glucose and also supports nerve tissue. Second, add more fiber to each meal, such as vegetables, beans, oatmeal. Fiber delays the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream, which is exactly what damaged nerves need. The third sign is where discomfort becomes real danger. It is what takes people to the emergency room the most. They arrive and tell them that a ball from their shoes appeared 3 weeks ago and still hasn't closed. They waited, thinking it would heal on its own. Most small wounds actually heal without help, but not when your blood sugar is consistently high. When blood glucose is elevated for too long, the body loses the ability to recover efficiently. Blood vessels, including the tiny ones in the feet, begin to become narrower and stiffer. This means that oxygen, white blood cells, and tissue-repairing nutrients simply can't get to the wound fast enough. The wound remains there, open, vulnerable, taking time to close. To understand, think of a garden hose with a serious kink. The water is there, but it doesn't get where it should. This is exactly what high sugar does to the circulation of the feet. The ingredients of healing are in the blood, but they do not reach the wound. And an open wound that does not heal is an infection waiting for the time to happen. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that foot ulcers in people with diabetes are the leading cause of non-traumatic lower limb amputations in the country, more than 100,000 a year. Almost all of these amputations were preceded by a small wound that was ignored. Therefore, after bathing, sit down and examine both feet carefully. Look between each toe, look at your heels. If you find any cuts, blisters, or cracks on the skin, wash with mild soap and water, apply an antiseptic, and cover. If there is no improvement in 2 days, it is time to call the doctor, not next week, in 48 hours. The fourth sign is there, visible, but almost no one associates it with sugar. People see their feet get darker or redder and think it's sunburn or simply the natural darker skin of the ankles. Sometimes it's true, but there's a specific pattern of discoloration, especially around the ankles, that catches the eye. When circulation is compromised by excess glucose, the legs and feet don't get enough fresh, oxygen-rich blood. The skin changes color as a consequence. A dark red or even a bluish tint may appear around the ankles. It is the skin warning that the blood flow to that region is insufficient. In some cases, the skin also becomes thinner and more fragile in these areas, another sign that the tissue is not being well nourished. A good analogy is to think of blood as a delivery truck that carries oxygen and nutrients. The feet are at the end of the body's longest route, the farthest distance from the heart. When roads narrow because of damaged blood vessels, deliveries stop arriving on time. The skin, without new oxygen, changes color. This is a distress signal that anyone can see with their own eyes, as long as they know what to look for. A study published in the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology found that these skin changes are detectable, on average, 18 months before the formal diagnosis of diabetes. The daily habit here is to dedicate 5 minutes in the morning to making circles with your ankles, lifting your toes, and stretching your calf. The small movement already makes the blood flow to the feet. For those who can't exercise, just elevating your feet a little while sitting helps a lot. The fifth sign is usually surprising because it seems something banal. People say that heels crack every winter, that it's just dry skin. And it is common, yes. But when the heels crack deeply in the middle of summer, or when no moisturizer solves it, no matter how much it passes, then it's a different story. Diabetes affects the autonomic nerves, those that control automatic functions that no one needs to think about, such as regulating moisture and sweat on the skin. When these nerves are damaged, the sweat glands in the feet stop working properly. Feet lose their natural moisture from the inside out, and no amount of lotion will fix the root cause. Imagine the skin as a wall that needs to be sealed. When these autonomic nerves are hit, the mortar between the bricks begins to crumble. Cracks appear, and these cracks are not just an aesthetic problem, they are open doors to bacteria and infections. In a foot with poor circulation, such an infection can become very serious very quickly. Health workers have seen patients with cracks so deep in their heels that they bled, and they had been applying lotion for years without result. This is not a skin problem. It is a nervous problem. The American Podiatrist Medical Association identifies chronic, difficult-to-treat dryness as a significant indicator of autonomic neuropathy in older people, a condition directly linked to prolonged increases in blood sugar. Autonomic neuropathy is not a minor nuisance. It is a sign that the nervous system is under serious stress. The nighttime habit is to moisturize the feet every night before going to sleep, with a good cream or pure coconut oil, applying it to the sole and heels but never between the toes because the moisture trapped there generates fungi. And, once again, drink 8 glasses of water a day because the skin needs hydration from the inside out. Before continuing, it is worth pausing for a sincere invitation. If any of these signs have already been noticed in yourself or in someone dear to you, this is important. You don't have to let it go. The rest of the conversation now moves on to the 6th sign, which is more serious than it sounds, because it involves not only the feet, but also what happens to the kidneys at the same time. Many people say that their feet swell because they spend too much time sitting or standing at work, and in fact, occasional swelling from activity is normal. But if the feet and ankles are always swollen, to the point of leaving deep marks on the socks every night, then the scenario changes. High blood sugar affects the kidneys, and the kidneys are responsible for controlling the body's fluid balance. When kidney function is impaired by years of high glucose, fluid begins to accumulate in the lowest part of the body, i.e., in the feet and ankles. This swelling, technically called edema, is a sign that the body's filtering system is overloaded. Think of the kidneys as a water treatment plant. Every drop of blood passes through them to be cleaned. When high sugar damages these filters, the system clogs, and the excess liquid has nowhere to go but down. Gravity does the rest, and fluid builds up in your ankles. If you press your finger on the swollen area and the mark remains for a few seconds, this is called locker edema, and it's not something to ignore. The National Kidney Foundation reports that diabetic kidney disease affects approximately 1 in 3 adults with diabetes, and swelling of the lower limbs is often the first visible sign that kidney function is being compromised. The recommendations are, when resting, elevate your feet above the level of the heart, even if they are only a few inches on top of a pillow, because this helps drain the fluid back to the center of the body. In addition, reduce sodium in food, because salt makes the body retain water, making edema much worse. It's worth reading food labels, because many canned and processed products are loaded with sodium. And if the swelling is new, persistent, or worsening, it is essential to take this complaint to the doctor at the next appointment, without waiting for it to become a bigger problem. The 7th sign is one of the most frequently misdiagnosed, especially among men. Many arrive saying that they have been taking pain medication for months, thinking it is arthritis or an old sports injury, and sometimes that's right, but not always. Sometimes the pain has a completely different origin, one that ordinary painkillers never reach. When nerves are damaged by chronic high sugar, they don't always stay numb and quiet. Sometimes they become hyperactive. Instead of losing sensation, they begin to fire intense random signals, which the brain interprets as severe pain. Patients describe it as a stabbing, electric shock, or hot needle in the foot. This happens most often at night when there are no other distractions. Imagine a broken car alarm that goes off every few minutes for no reason at all. No one is breaking into the car, the alarm is faulty. That's what a damaged nerve does. It sends alarm signals to the brain when nothing is really happening. The pain is completely real, but the source is nerve dysfunction, not a foot injury. And taking common medicines does not solve a damaged nerve. What they do is mask a signal that the body is desperately trying to send. And masking signs is the last thing you want to do when your nerves are crying out for help. A major study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that painful diabetic neuropathy affects about 25% of people with diabetes and is often mistaken for arthritis, tendonitis, or age-related joint pain. The morning recommendation is simple: 5 minutes of gentle stretching for your feet and ankles before you even get out of bed. Bend your feet, make circles with your ankles, pull your toes back gently. This makes the blood circulate before putting weight on the feet. And every night, before bed, a gentle 3-minute foot massage with light circular movements along the sole and up the ankle. The 8th sign is the one that shows how far the problem has already evolved. When this appears, the damage is no longer initial. And almost always the person's reaction is to say that they have always had cold feet. They say that his wife has been stealing the electric blanket every winter for 30 years. You can laugh together, but the important question is, are your feet still cold in July? Are they cold under 3 blankets? Because then the concern is real. Cold feet that persist regardless of the ambient temperature, cold in summer, cold under heavy blankets, cold even when the rest of the body is warm, are a strong indication that blood circulation in the lower limbs is very compromised. The blood vessels became narrow or stiff to the point that warm blood did not reach the tips of the feet in sufficient volume. A helpful image is to think of blood vessels as a heating system with pipes that go into every room. When these pipes narrow because of sugar damage, the heat does not reach the furthest room. The room stays cool no matter how hard the boiler works. The cold has nothing to do with the weather, it has to do with the pipes. The American Heart Association identifies peripheral artery disease caused by narrowing of blood vessels as affecting more than 8 million Americans, with diabetes being the single biggest risk factor. Cold feet are one of the oldest and most consistent symptoms. The best answer here is a brisk 30-minute walk every day, not a walk, but an intentional walk, with arms wagging. This forces blood circulation to the feet and legs, strengthens vessel walls, and over time can reverse some of the initial narrowing. If 30 minutes seems too much, start with 10. The important thing is to start today. The 9th and final sign is the one that is almost never mentioned, neither in brochures nor in office conversations, and that most people pass by, including many health professionals. But when you learn to see, you never stop seeing. During a foot exam, when looking at the legs and tops of the feet, one sometimes notices a visible absence of hair in these areas. The person looks down and strange because he had never noticed. And that's exactly the problem. A discrete sign, easy to miss, but very important. Hair follicles need a constant supply of blood and oxygen to function. When circulation is seriously impaired by prolonged sugar growth, the follicles in the legs and feet stop receiving what they need. Over time, they stop producing hair altogether. This hair loss is a visible indicator of blood vessel damage that has been progressing, in many cases, for years. An apt metaphor is to think of follicles as small plants in a garden. When the irrigation pipe narrows or clogs, plants don't die overnight. They simply stop growing gradually. Growthlessness is the body sending a message about the health of blood vessels, a message that anyone can see every time they look at their own legs. Research published in the journal Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism found that hair loss in the lower extremities is significantly correlated with peripheral vascular disease in patients with diabetes, being a reliable and often overlooked sign that doctors are trained to check. After reading this text, look at your legs and the tops of your feet. If the fur is much thinner than the rest of the leg or completely absent, schedule a blood glucose test for this week, not next month. It is a simple, low-cost exam covered by health insurance in most cases, a small amount that can change the entire trajectory of your health. There were 9 signs, 9 opportunities to identify a problem before it sets in for good. The hardest part for those who work on the front lines of health is sitting in front of a person who had all these signs for 2 years and only now will discover what they meant. Not because she didn't care, quite the contrary, most care deeply. It's just that no one had given her that information. Now those who are reading this text have this information. The final request is only one. Tonight, before going to sleep, sit down and look at your feet. Take 30 seconds. Observe the skin, look between your fingers, notice if there is numbness, check if there is any wound that should not be there. Only 30 seconds. If you notice or feel any of the items on this list, contact your doctor tomorrow, not next week. Tomorrow. Because the sooner this is identified, the easier it will be to control in most cases. Just with changes in diet, a daily walk, and a good conversation with a trusted professional. You worked hard for the life you have, for your independence, for your health, for your freedom to do what you like. Don't let something as manageable as blood sugar take that away from you, just because no one has ever taught you what to look for. Now you know. If this content was helpful, share it with someone you care about, a family member, a friend, a neighbor. You may be handing them something they didn't even know they needed. For those who want conversations like this on a regular basis, there are channels and spaces dedicated to topics that really matter to health after the age of 60, things that are talked about in the office, and that most people never hear outside of there. Stay aware, stay active, and take good care of your feet.